Now, as more and more dirt comes out about Prince Andrew's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, something else is happening in royal circles. Meghan Markle has decided to launch her As Ever Christmas collection. The candles, by the way, are $64 if you want to buy one of these. Frankly, I can't get out of bed in the morning unless I know that Meghan has developed a new product or TV show. Kinsey Schofield joins us, host of Kinsey Unfiltered. She's not in the States. She's not on a plane. She's live here in the studio, literally wearing a Union Jack.
Well, yes, I love your country. I'm so excited to be here. Can I tell you, though, there is some other breaking news out of the States involving Meghan. They appeared at the Dodgers game. They had very expensive seats, sitting in front of, like, you know, Magic Johnson and you know, very important individuals. Yeah. So we all know that high-profile seats. When the camera panned to them on the big screen, there were boos, and Prince Harry awkwardly laughed and reacted to it. I think that it's probably, this was just a way for them to promote Meghan's new products launching, like, trying to be out and about, but not a great reflection on their popularity to be booed in a big stadium in an event like that.
I thought you were going to say it was going to be the kind of, when the camera panned, it was that Coldplay moment, you know, when the CEO, and there was going to be, I don't know, maybe Meghan snogging Ellen DeGeneres or something, you know. That would have been a great story.
You're right. That's the better. That's a better version.
Unfortunately, I can't unsee that now, so I apologise for even raising that, particularly if it's your lunchtime. So Meghan doesn't miss a trick when it comes to, you know, here's another way to commercialise the fact that I am not a member of the royal family, but I actually will keep telling people I am because I have titles and that's my only way of essentially having an income, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah, when she was teasing this drop, first of all, she said, save the date, October 28th. Are you getting married? Yeah. I mean, that's a very, save the date. That's a commitment she's asking for, that we saved this date. Yeah. And then I think a lot of us were a bit disappointed to find out that the ultimate drop was you could buy a package of loose fruit spread to put under the tree this holiday season, or $64 candles, or an it's not just an $89 bottle of wine. If you want to save on shipping, you have to buy huge packs of it, and so now you're spending like $800 on bottles of wine so that you can save on shipping. I don't think that Meghan understands her true audience. I don't think she understands the type of people, like, because she does have fans. We'd be lying if we said she didn't, but I don't think it's the market she's trying to appeal to.
But, well, indeed, because I don't know what the demographic is of a Meghan Markle fan, but I do wonder, when you're putting together your kind of, you know, what you need for Christmas and stuff, did anybody like go, well, we've got the list, we've got the chocolates, we've got the turkey, we've got, we haven't ordered the Meghan Markle wine. No one ever said that, did they? There's no one out there that's desperately looking for a bit of Markle fizz.
Who wants slimy jam under the tree this holiday season? That's not something that...
jam,
she does. She does have a Christmas/holiday special coming out in November, so I'm sure we'll see some of these potentially. I mean, nothing is organized when it comes to everything that's we've seen unroll when it's associated with As Ever. I'd like to tell you that the Christmas special will feature some of these products, but I'm actually not very confident in that, knowing that she probably filmed it months ago in someone else's home. But we also have a Christmas special to look forward to.
A Christmas to look forward to. And of course it saddens me really, because this came up the other day when Meghan and Harry first came on the scene as, you know, this was his new girlfriend, and she turned up and they said, you know, this is great progress for the royal family. She was, by the way, nobody thought Meghan Markle was anything but a white woman forever.
No, this is facts.
Yeah, that's just a fact.
Well, if you look at her Los Angeles resume as an actress, she also says she's Caucasian, so yes.
Well, that's interesting.
Yes.
So nobody ever thought that. So the idea that this was all steeped in racism against her is absolute nonsense, as we all know, but that's an argument that, you know, clearly she and others like to make. But my point, Kinsey, was going to be this. When they first set up on the scene, I thought, wow, this is brilliant. This is going to be, you know, two young people, two good-looking people, and it's going to be the new face of the royal family. It's exactly what they need. They'll be the kind of Instagram royal family for the first time. And then it all just fell apart and went to mush. And now, and I was speaking to another royal expert.
Well, you're cheating on me.
This week. I do apologise for that. Yeah, it was only Rupert, you know.
Oh,
Rupert,
okay,
so,
we love Rupert.
So yeah, I bumped into Rupert. We were saying, where are the people? We were actually talking about Prince Andrew, which we'll come on to. Where are all of the kind of Harry and Meghan friends that come out and have told a different story against the ones that appear quite relentlessly in the press? They're not there. No one comes out in big defence.
Remember,
where have they gone? Yes.
I don't think that they're friends anymore. I imagine that she's cut them off. But she had a girlfriend, and I apologize that I'm forgetting the actress's name, but she's on the show The Morning Show. She plays like the weather girl on The Morning Show, which currently is on Apple Plus.
The Jennifer Aniston show.
Yes. Yeah. One of her good friends was on that show, and she went on this morning here with Philip Schofield and Holly at the time and defended Meghan Markle. She's actually the person that snapped that Christmas photo of Harry and Meghan and Archie crawling towards the camera. Where is she? She's completely stopped talking about them. Nick Jonas's wife used to defend them. She doesn't anymore. Chrissy Teigen gave this bizarre, who appeared on With Love Season 2, gave this bizarre interview with People magazine within the last 2 weeks where she said Meghan Markle is a polarizing character. If you're my friend, you're going to say, oh, she's misunderstood. You just don't know her like I do. You don't go like, she's polarizing. Yeah,
it's just utterly bizarre. I won't get you to comment on the flares, the smoke and the staging. A very kind of, it's almost an Americanized thing. I understand what they were doing there. But what about the speech? What did you make of Mr. Farage's big speech? And of course, important, the timing of this, which nobody could have made up, an hour after the Deputy PM resigned.
That's right. Well, Nigel Farage was due to speak mid-afternoon today, but that was brought forward amid some speculation that the Labour Party was planning to drip out new ministerial appointments precisely to coincide with Mr. Farage's speech in an effort to do whatever they could to overshadow it. It was a typically Farage barnstorming performance, all scrambled together at the very short notice, and there were some pretty important announcements out of it actually. I would start with a pledge to stop the small boats within 2 weeks of taking office. If Nigel Farage wins the next election, he has promised that those small boats will cease to cross the channel within a fortnight. Now, many of our viewers and listeners will say, well, we really, really hope that this Labour government will stop the boats long before then. But many others will fear that that just isn't going to happen. There was another important announcement on the creation of a new kind of unit for preparation for government, and that is kind of driven by Reform's early experiences at local government level and the level of obstruction that the newly elected Reform leaders in those councils are facing as they try to push through Reform agendas. And if the party's experiencing that kind of resistance at a local level, this is a really big warning sign of what is to come if they get elected in 2029, or if it's earlier, as Mr. Farage has speculated today. There's another announcement that I want to point to, which I think is also very important, and that is that from the main stage today, the Reform leader pledged that under a Reform government, there would be no more Muslim Brotherhood in the UK. That is an extremist Islamic organisation that is proscribed by most of our allies, ironically proscribed in many parts of the Middle East, including the United Arab Emirates, where I live. It's has been a source of much bewilderment and frankly frustration among our Middle Eastern allies, in particular the UAE, that Muslim Brotherhood is not banned. David Cameron looked at banning it, stopped short of it. So did the Labour Party. They've never done it. And so that has come from Reform today. And this is all about trying to, tackle Islamic extremism. So those are three really keynote announcements, I would have said, from today. And I would expect a lot more to come over the course of the next 24 hours from this conference.
Isabel, is it fair to say that, we know that Nigel is a gifted orator, he can command a room, he walks into a room, people wait to hear what he's got to say. And of course, when you're in opposition, there aren't that many advantages being in opposition, but one of them, I suppose, is that you can throw stones and kick balls into open goals on a fairly regular basis. And of course, you can aim high with your promises, and that is a good place to be. And of course, as you move more towards a general election, you have to refine those promises and put some meat on the bones. But when you put all of that together, Nigel Farage can't lose at the moment in terms of winning over the room.
Well, that's absolutely right. You know, I was just thinking as you said that, this is why I'm a journalist, not a politician, because it's always so much easier, isn't it, to criticise from the sidelines and to actually implement really difficult stuff. And I'm not under any illusions, you know, someone who's been part of this, if you like, reform journey on the right, about the scale of the challenge that a newly elected reform government would face in actually pushing through some of the very radical promises that they've made. I mean, deporting 600,000 illegal immigrants in the first term will be a massive undertaking. And, you know, whoever is leading that, good luck to them. But you've got to be ambitious as an opposition party. You've got to make those promises and underpin them with really practical plans to actually achieve them. And there are many years to go. You know, I'm sure many reform supporters would love an election next week, but it's not going to happen. So there is a long time to prepare for power, and that is exactly what Nigel Farage and his growing team intends to do.
I was just thinking this in the last couple of days, Isabel, that given, and this is just the nature of the democratic process, the nature of new parties, it just so happens that although there's a huge backstory, of course, to how reform was formed and all of the mechanics, it doesn't go back months, it goes back many years. You know that better than most. And the hard work and the graft that's been put in by, you know, Nigel, Richard Tyson, others, has been, you know, a lot of behind the scenes stuff that people don't see. But nonetheless, the reality is there's only 5 MPs there at the moment. So we would be in this curious position. I actually find this quite exciting in one respect, that if there was a general election, you may well have somebody who currently works in Timpson's who the next day is the Home Secretary.
Well, Nigel Farage has been quite kind of embracing of that notion. You know, he said, look, we are going to do things differently, he has said, announcing that he will bring in super talents from outside the world of politics. And, you know, there are risks attached to that, for sure. You know, I've seen it actually in previous administrations. I remember under Labour, I think it was probably Gordon Brown's government of all the talents, so-called goats, that came in from business, and they hated it and they didn't last very long. But this is going to be a lot better thought out, and in fact, reform is going to have to do that because there's only so many by-elections you can have between now and the next election. Inevitably, if reform wins, and look, you know, there's 3 or 4 years to go. You know, we all know in this game that a week is a very long time in politics. So who knows what may happen. I think it's a bit, you've got to be really careful about not looking like you're sort of deciding who's having what job at this early stage of the game. You know, what you want to be doing as an opposition is actually putting in place what is required to win, never mind deciding who's having what jobs. But more generally, to bring in outside expertise, to bring in people who are absolutely brilliant and the best and the most respected in their fields and are prepared to actually serve their country in this way, I think that could be a very, very refreshing thing. Albeit it's going to have a risk attached to it, but it just could be quite remarkable.
I feel deflated. I feel angry. I've had a woman on the phone to me who's just called me crying because her little girl's moving from primary school to secondary school. She doesn't want to send her back. Last night, there was a lot of very angry people at a demonstration whereby people were saying to the police, there's 500 of you here in meat wagons and riot gear. Where are you when these children are coming out of school? Where are you when these migrants are hanging around the streets, drinking, harassing girls? Where, you know, and it's so much more than this now. It's so much more than this one hotel. This is an absolute disregard for the people of this country, for the UK residents, the taxpayers, the everyday people who just want to live their lives, who want to have children, who want them to be safe. The Home Office don't care about us. They've blatantly said in a court of law that a migrant's rights come before the local people. I mean, can you imagine, and I know I'm ranting and forgive me, but I'm so furious. Can you imagine that J.D. Vance stands up in the Supreme Court in the States and he says to the American people that migrants come before them? Can you imagine the carnage that would occur? But because we're British, we've got to suck it up and listen and accept it. I just can't see this is going to end well, Ian.
Is there, you may not know the answers to this, Oliver, but I'll ask you anyway. I mean, is there an appeal to the appeal, as it were?
So, as far as we're aware, and it's difficult because obviously, you know, when you're listening to these judges, a lot of the time they talk in circles and in legal jargon. So for everyday people, it's hard to follow. Yeah. One presumes that what will happen is in October, there will be a court case where they will re-look at all the facts around this hotel and then make a decision from there. But I think it's important, and not just because I'm a reform candidate, although that makes me even more angry about this situation, but the fact is it was obvious from that case and from the judge's feedback that Epping Forest Council failed multiple times to deal with this situation, multiple times, and the judge was very critical of them. So to be fair, they've set us up for failure. And that makes everybody absolutely furious because they have stood in front of us and they have told us over and over again that they are doing their utmost to make sure that the people of Epping Forest get what they want. Yet they knew that they had a year that they did nothing. Yeah. That is infuriating.
And getting angry, I mean, even if every single person staying in a migrant hotel was a law-abiding, decent person, nobody disputes, of course, that probably most are. But the fact is, if you suddenly introduce 200 people into your postcode, I think you've got the right I mean, if they built a brick wall in your postcode, you'd have the right to argue against it. If they stick 200 people inside something, I think you're allowed to be a bit miffed by that, aren't you?
Do you know what? If you take away the sexual violence and harassment and all those dreadful things, put that to one side, and you look at the unfairness of this situation, there are people up and down this country, the majority of people, who are working very, very hard, some of them working 6-7 days a week to put food on the table, to pay the ever-increasing bills, to pay the taxes, and to put food on the table for their children. And they see criminals, because they are criminals, because they have broken the law by coming into this country, being put in luxury hotels, some with spas, being given 3 meals a day and having all their amenities paid for. So people are furious. So regardless of whether or not they were all angels sitting in these hotels.
It doesn't matter. No, you're absolutely right. 100%. And that is the kind of, I think, the bigger root of anger around this in terms of, you know, this being just one story of hundreds around the country, the cost of £7 million a day. And that doesn't include all the other issues and resources like the NHS, etc.
Do you know what? I read an article that the BBC put online the other day, and they had the story of a guy called John, a migrant called John. Obviously, his name's not John. And it said that he was terrified to leave his hotel because of the protests. John has been in that hotel in Surrey for 3 years. Wow. 3 years. One man who has not had his asylum processed. Yeah. He is fleeing Tanzania, which people will disagree and have disagreed, but it is one of the safest countries in Africa. There is no war in Tanzania. Why is John being paid for in a Surrey hotel for 3 years? The majority of people in this country cannot afford to have one night away for some special occasion in a hotel in Surrey. Yet these men are living the high life, and then the BBC are saying, "Oh, John, he can't leave his hotel because he's scared." Well, do you know what? The country is scared, and they're scared most about the fact that the Home Office and our government seem to hate us.
As I said at the beginning, it's an incredible headline that 1.9 million foreign citizens are now claiming benefits in this country. Cost of universal credit payments alone reaching 10 billion last year. I mean, these are jaw-dropping, eye-watering numbers. The figures include a wide range of benefits as Labour unveils a good citizen test for migrants seeking settlement. Labour still doesn't seem to have an answer, but Reform UK are pretty clear on this. Have a listen to their leader, Nigel Farage, and what he had to say.
We've given you full details. None of the 800,000 plus that came here under the Boris wave that will be available to apply for indefinite leave to remain over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, none of them will be given indefinite leave to remain. None of them will be given access to the UK's benefit system, and none of them will be able to bring dependents. That, I think, is quite a lot of very exact policy detail.
That's what Mr Farage said. The Conservatives are sort of echoing a little bit of that these days, Chloe. I'm not sure to what extent or whether their heart's truly in it, but these numbers are horrific.
Yes, and just going back to the question you were asking at the beginning, Ian, as to whether these people claiming benefits are people who have been here for decades and decades, just when you look through these figures in the Times article on this, although they don't clearly define a foreign citizen, they go on to say that on top of this 1.9 million, there are an additional 1.5 million foreign citizens who have been here long enough to also get British citizenship who are claiming benefits. So overall, if you include foreign citizens with and without British passports, it's 3.4 million in total. So it sounds like that 1.9 million are people who have not been here long enough to get a British passport, presumably because you have to have indefinite leave to remain first to qualify for universal credit and whatnot. Those are people who have been here for the 5 years they need to be to get indefinite leave to remain, but not long enough to get a British passport. And I think Nigel Farage's policy is correct. I think that they are right, unlike Keir Starmer, who thinks it's racist, to go back to the people who have been given indefinite leave to remain and say, no, we're scrapping that and we're going to have to do a review every few years to just check that you speak English and you earn money and you pay your way rather than living off the state. I think that that's fair.
I don't think anybody could say it isn't fair. And when I look at those numbers, as I mentioned in that intro, Chloe, that we have this whacking great big increase of more than a third since 2022 of foreign citizens claiming universal credit. So this is in the last 2.5, 3 years. So who are those people? How did they arrive here? On what criteria did they arrive here? And how on earth, if they arrived here as a skilled worker, then what's going on if we need to top up their wage with universal credit?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the size of the welfare state is ballooning for both British citizens and foreign citizens, and it is just completely unsustainable, as well as completely unfair. And there have been some interesting graphics being put out by, I think it's Migration Watch is the organisation, where they've identified certain boroughs, and for example, Birmingham and London, where the majority of people in those boroughs who are in social housing, i.e. being funded by the state, are foreign born, and people are thinking this isn't fair, especially given the huge wait for social housing. And then they've also put up the percentages in those boroughs of the people who are foreign born who are actually in employment, and it is just absolutely shocking. And it really does feel like we're some sort of charity for the rest of the world. And of course it's nice to be charitable, but not when you are broke and your own citizens can't get social housing, can't get an NHS appointment, can't put food on the table, can't pay their rent. And
I mean, that list is extensive. As you just said, we've got huge issues with the cost of living crisis, people trying to make ends meet, and not just talking about people who are economically at the lowest point of the ladder, people who are, the just about managing group who work and they've got jobs and they were seen as reasonable jobs, but just not covering things, struggling like mad. And Rachel Reeves telling us, we've got to find money from somewhere. We've got to do all we can and pull together and, do the right thing. And you read statistics like this. Many people will not even be familiar with the mighty Flag Institute, which is a crime in itself.
It is. They all ought to be familiar. They all ought to join the Flag Institute. That would be even better.
Indeed. I mean, flags, there's a lot of history to flags, obviously. They do mean something, and invariably, particularly, I think, in this country, the flags, both the collective Union Jack, the Union flag, as well as each country's own flag symbols are really quite beautiful things. I mean, they're quite nice to look at. Quite why anybody would be offended by them is a mystery.
It's a mystery to me as well, because flags are extremely important symbols of common purpose, of unity, of community cohesion, of a sense of oneness, and can appeal to people who are otherwise have little in common. Wherever you come from, whatever your background, whatever your race, religion, culture or creed, your national flag is something you can stand and hold hands with your neighbour beneath, and you're equal under the flag. And we should be proud to fly our flags to show our common purpose together.
Should they be, I mean, is there a flag protocol? Flags often live up a mast. We know that. They sometimes hang from a particular building. Sometimes they're waved at a jubilee or a coronation, that kind of stuff. Should we be mindful of where we put flags, or is it anything goes when it comes to a flag?
Well, up to a point, anything goes. But I mean, common sense and balance needs to be applied to all of this. And a flag needs to be treated with respect and dignity because it reflects and represents the entire nation. So it deserves great respect. If your listeners look on the Flag Institute website, there are guides there as to how best to fly your flag, where to fly it, how to treat it, which order the flag should go in. All that sort of thing is covered on the Flag Institute website. Yeah. So there are protocols, and they are there.
So the protocols are there. There's a frustration, I think, for some people putting up flags. It's not just about wanting a flag up there. It's sort of making a wider point about British identity. Yes.
The fact is that in the past, we were not a very flaggy nation, because in the distant past, we were an homogenous nation. People grew up in the same village and lived there all their lives and never went anywhere and didn't know anyone who didn't look like them or speak like them. But at that time, we exported our flags all over the world. These were the days of the British Empire. That's long gone now. And then it's now become the Commonwealth. And since the Second World War, we have become an extremely diverse nation. So now we do actually need to fly flags to show that we are a united common population with ideas in common. We didn't need to do that in the past, but we do need to do it now. And the example of people who do that so very well are Canada, Australia, and the United States, to name just three. And because they started with diverse populations and had to bring them together to a sense of a common national identity. And now we need to do a bit of that ourselves. So I think the councils in question here in these arguments should use a little bit of consideration and take a nuanced approach to this and work with the communities they represent, because they do represent these communities, work with them to work out how best to address the obvious wish to fly these flags. Sometimes they're flown from lampposts and things like that. Well, I'm not going to sit here and suggest people break the law, obviously, but there's nothing wrong really with flying a flag from a lamppost.
Not really. I mean, there's greater offences. I think there are greater offences, and
the council could work with the local communities to ensure that this happens properly, because it looks good. It looks great. People can go out in the morning and say, hey, we're all together under these flags. We can all hold hands and move ahead together in unity.
here's an area that has a connecting sort of interest in terms of a big government department. This is the Home Office. Spent £1 million on mass fatality tents, which could store up to 700 bodies in case of emergency. This sparks fears, of course, of undisclosed threats, naturally. Terrorism risks are still substantial. Disease concerns like Ebola. Are the government hiding something, or is this just standard fare? Who knows? Let's speak to a man who knows this territory well. Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Danny, good afternoon to you. I mean, when you read that there was actually some job adverts, I'm sure you saw these, saying, you know, anyone want to apply for this contract? We need the tents and all that goes with it in case, you know, you need to either refrigerate or keep or store 700 bodies. And I was reading that thinking, man, is there something we don't know here? Is something hiding around the corner, Danny, or is this just standard practice?
Afternoon, Ian. It's a bit alarming, isn't it? At first sight, you do think, what is the Home Office not telling us?
Yeah.
But I think actually the truth is, it's rather more prosaic than that. It's a bit mundane and a bit routine. I think what the Home Office is doing is it's had a contract, I think, for the past couple of years to provide contingency support to local authorities should there be some terrible event, another pandemic, or a terrible terrorist atrocity, or some other major event that causes a huge loss of life. And it's just having those contingencies to be able to offer support to local authorities if they need tents or storage compounds of some kind. You know, some of it would be refrigerated so that bodies can be kept and stored and all the appropriate procedures can be gone through. So it's doing those things, those kind of boring things that don't really get any headlines unless when there is some terrible incident and there is a pandemic, everyone says, well, where was the preparation? Why didn't you plan for this? I mean, that's what we've got a COVID inquiry partly for at the moment is, you know, has been looking at the preparations or the lack of preparations and the warnings that, you know, a pandemic might be coming and we weren't prepared for it. So I suppose it's the kind of although the headline looks rather shocking, it's something that's fairly routine and standard and probably quite sensible.
Without sounding too macabre about it, Danny, when I read this, oddly, I thought, well, if you were preparing for something substantial, a big outbreak or, you know, some kind of horrendous terror attack, then 700 doesn't seem that many, to be honest.
I'm not quite sure where they get the number from.
Yes, I wonder whether is there some kind of science behind the number, I wonder.
You know, I don't know. I imagine there is some kind of science behind it. There's some kind of calculation about the level of capacity that local authorities have already, and they do have some capacity, and then what the Home Office could do in addition. And then perhaps there are some plans, you know, that could tide you over for a certain length of time. And then if they needed to procure more storage facilities, then they could do that. But, you know, it seems to me that this is, you know, fairly sensible. The Home Office is saying the capability has existed since 2005 and it has been maintained under all governments. So this isn't something that Labour has just conjured up, it would seem. But it's something that, you know, in the event that it's needed, it's there, whether that be, as we said, a terrorist atrocity or a pandemic or some other natural disaster. And obviously, you know, we know that the weather seems to be getting more extremes. It's possible that there could be something of that ilk as well.
I do apologise on that very point, Ingrid, for the lack of my Royal Lodge knowledge, but it does sound a bit like that, doesn't it? It's like a cosy, almost Disney-like place. It's massive.
It is massive, yes. It's got 30 rooms plus, I think.
Yeah.
No, well, of course you could think it was a lodge. It could be like a fishing lodge or...
That's what I had in my mind.
Lodge. I think you were thinking of a gate lodge, really,
Correct.
weren't you?
Yeah, 100%. Yes. But, of course, we know that Prince Andrew, as he was Prince Andrew, will no longer be living there. That's factual. Where he lives next is, of course, the big question mark. And now we're hearing that, you know, there could be a beautiful palatial place for him to go in the UAE.
Well, I think there's a lot of pluses for him for doing that. It's actually where King Juan Carlos went when he was sort of exiled out of Spain, because he was in some problems with, laundering some kind of money. I better be careful what I say here. Let's not say laundering, but receiving many millions of dollars. And he got himself into a few financial difficulties, and he decided to abdicate. And he went to live in Abu Dhabi, which is, he actually would be a sort of semi-neighbour of Andrew if Andrew decided to go there.
Wow. I mean, that in itself is rather, what an interesting, you couldn't write that, could you? I mean, that's
you couldn't write it.
That is extraordinary. I mean, the one thing that's for sure, I guess it depends, and you are closer to this, Ingrid, because you've reported brilliantly on this area for many, many years. He's not going to starve, is he? I mean, let's face it, Mr. Mountbatten Windsor is not going to go away cap in hand anywhere, because he'll have, he's got money, he'll have a nice apartment, he just won't have the titles, the prestige. Which hurts him most?
I think it will hurt him most not having the titles and prestige, because that's how he's always lived.
Yeah.
I mean, he was born in a palace, he was raised in a palace. I think the only time he hasn't been in full grandeur was when he was in the Royal Navy. But even then, he had subordinates to do things for him.
Sure.
I don't think Andrew's ever, certainly won't have ever been to a supermarket, although, of course, we know very famously he has been to Pizza Express. But I just don't think he's ever really stepped into the real world. I could be wrong, but I get the impression he never has.
And would, in his new life as Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, he will be, one would assume, I said, he's not going to go cap in hand, but, I mean, money's going to come from somewhere. He's not going to be short of money. Is he self-sufficient?
Well, his brother, the king, has agreed, has to agree to finance him. Because, I mean, Andrew without any money would be really, really dangerous. Because goodness knows who he'd go to borrow it next. But, I mean, the king very wisely says, I'm going to finance him, I'm going to look after him, I'm going to find him somewhere to live.
Yeah.
Because I also think that King Charles needs to have a certain amount of control over Andrew, because, you never quite know what he is going to do next. And if he's stuck away in Sandringham in a sort of small, well, it won't be that small, but a small abode, goodness knows what he might try and get up to.
Yeah.
And I think the main problem with Sandringham, to my way of thinking, is that it's going to attract a lot of press, because there's lots of public roads running across the Sandringham estate, where people are quite absolutely legally entitled to go. So they're going to be on the lookout for Andrew, because that's the picture everyone be interested in seeing.
Of course, and tacitly it still kind of connects him to the royal family, doesn't it? In that sense that, it doesn't, that there will be that feeling among some that actually he's still part of it. Look at where he lives.
Well, I think we can't get away from the fact that he is the king's brother, and he is the queen's second son. And from the moment Andrew was born in 1960, and for 20 years he was second in line to the throne. So he's lived with that kind of grandeur and that kind of, people bowing and saying yes, yes, no, sir, and then later on, Your Majesty.
Yeah.
I think that it's second nature to him. So that's why I think this idea of the palace in Abu Dhabi might be much more appealing to him than somewhere on the Sandringham estate.
The police were at our house for about 3 hours. They went after this. They went into our house, searched it from top to bottom. There was so much equipment, they took it all out. And then we had to get a neighbour to come from 17 miles away to look after the children. They were there for 3 hours.
I mean, just the mere idea that you'd had an email communication with somebody who had said they didn't like it very much.
Yes.
And that provoked Was it 6 officers altogether?
It was 6 officers. I mean, basically, lies were told. The fake priest was saying that I was calling on my followers to beat him up, that I called him a PDF file online, and that I had given out his address, and that I was getting my 2.5 million followers to go around and beat him up on the street. Now, this could have been verified by a check.
Yeah.
Because it was completely fake, but they didn't. They didn't even check that claim. Okay.
You think the man of the cloth might have been a bit hesitant before saying something that could be easily checked as well?
Well, our barrister is all over this because he said the evidence was just basically non-existent.
Yes.
So we're going to be suing them for basically kidnapping and false imprisonment.
Yeah.
And we're going to take them criminally. We're going to sue them criminally. He said there was absolutely no basis for the arrest. And my emails, people are saying, oh, you sent violent emails threatening. My emails were not violent. The most I said was to the bishop he was a disgrace for not taking this priest out of service.
Well, that sounds perfectly reasonable, put like that, doesn't it?
But basically, I think the problem is that the police are run now by emotions, by your feelings. They really are the hurty feelings police, because if you can go in and say that your feelings are hurt and you feel subjectively alarm and distress, that's all they want, because they use it as an excuse to seize your electronics, because they want to get you on something that you're looking at your computer, because that's really what they want. Okay, so all our stuff was sent to Luton, it was sent to the lab. Everything was down.
God.
Yeah, it was sent
what
to...
did they think you were running? Some kind of soprano racket?
My little boy Zaki had a tag on the computer. He says, oh, they've been taken to Luton, which apparently is the big centre for downloading all your stuff. So we had about several computers, all the hard drives, all our phones. Every single thing was downloaded over a period of about 3 days. All our family, everything. They didn't find anything. So yes, I have had my hard drives checked. There was nothing on it. And I think they were really, really disappointed.
I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? You'd think if you were telling somebody that story, then the crime, in inverted commas, that you would have had to have committed would be some sort of international drug lord.
I know.
You know, somebody who was...
We're running a terror cell.
You're running a terror cell, something like that. The idea that a lone complaint at a police station would even result in that. And the bit that I really don't get, Brendan, if somebody had turned up at the police station and they said, look, OK, we'll send an officer round at some point, and, I don't know, a couple of days later you had a knock on the door from PC Smithers and said, very sorry to disturb you, Mr Kavanagh. I've had this fellow come in, he said this, can we just hear your side? That would have been OK. Well,
Ian, you've obviously got the voice of common sense, right? But apparently,
we are the station of common sense.
But apparently under Blair, this changed. Blair brought in these laws where the police could come in gung-ho like this. They didn't used to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And the overkill is just unbelievable.
It's that, isn't it?
And like also, you know, a couple of million people have seen this arrest, and the police's reputation is going lower and lower and lower with the public. They're shoplifting all over the place, knife crime, snatch crime. The police haven't got resources, but you send an angry email or you put a tweet on and they come down on you and take you in. I mean, how much did this arrest cost?
Well, yeah, and all the forensic people that had to look through your hard drive.
This cost thousands.
When you had the interview, did you know, was there a point when the officers, you could tell the officers interviewing you were thinking, this is a bit bonkers?
No, because obviously they were going, I mean, really the whole crux of this was the fake priest victim statement. I mean, that's really what swung this whole thing into motion. And we were stuck in the cells. My wife was in the cells. After about 5 hours, we were put in different cells. The inspector, Inspector Lindsay, a female inspector from Kempston Police Station, she came down, she looked in the cell and she said, oh, we're figuring out whether we should let you go or not, but because the charge is so serious, we're keeping you and your wife in longer.
So serious?
Yeah.
Right.
And
that
so
you sent four emails to her.
Yeah, so we didn't get home until midnight, myself and my wife. Now, we want to know, what evidence were they running off? Right, this really needs to be taken to court, because it beggars belief that the standard of evidence was so low to even allow this, right?
These discussions about defining Islamophobia are so critical, but they're being held in private by a small coterie, a group led by Dominic Grieve, the former Tory, who many people will remember tried to thwart Brexit at every step of the process, along with 3 Muslims. They're the ones who are going to decide on the definition of Islamophobia. It looks like they're going to lean towards what's the all-party parliamentary group's definition, which is an extremely insidious definition. They define Islamophobia as being a form of racism that targets Muslimness and perceptions of Muslimness. Now, what does perceived Muslimness mean? I mean, this is quite ridiculous. What essentially it's saying is, if you attack anything that somebody thinks is linked to Islam,
Yeah.
you could be criminalized as being Islamophobic. That could actually mean that we can't discuss polygamy or cousin marriage or child marriage or religiously sanctioned wife beating, even perhaps not being able to discuss the rape gangs. That's how insidious this is. It's coming at a time, of course, where we see in America and elsewhere great concern about the threats to free speech in this country. Britain is no longer, last month a report came out saying that Britain is no longer included in the top category of nations with the highest level of free speech. All the other nations are there from the West: Australia, Canada, America, Europe. We, in this Global Freedom of Expression report, have been relegated to the second tier of nations next to Colombia, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. This is all very worrying stuff.
And it's interesting that, as you said at the beginning, Rafe, I mean, this is just one religion for some curious reason. I mean, it would make, I'd give them a little bit of credibility if they were just honest and said, look, we actually quite like the idea of a blasphemy law and it applies to all faiths, and therefore we will be equally, will come down equally on anyone that takes criticism to another level, shall we say. You know, we want to smash up your house because you're a Christian, or we're going to throw pork chops at your windows because you're a Jew, etc. If that was the direction of travel, I would still have a problem with it, but you could see a consistency. But this is just isolating one faith. Do we know what the thinking behind it was, Rafe, as to why they selected just Islam for this?
You may well ask that question. To get to the first part of your comment there, absolutely. All religious minorities are already protected. There is absolutely no need for this. The 2010 Equality Act protects all religions, and there's the 2006 Racial and Religious Hatred Act, which makes it an offence to incite hatred against someone on the basis of their religion. But crucially, that act makes clear that that does not prohibit discussing or criticising the religion. It's one thing, you know, we should be talking about anti-Muslim hatred, which is a vile thing, just as bad as anti-Semitism. But no religion should be free from criticism. No ideology should be free from criticism. But that's 100%. What this is going to do. And to get to your point, why is this being done? It's being done because Labour is petrified of losing the Muslim vote. We all talk about the Reform MPs who won at the last general election. We need to talk more about the independent Muslim vote MPs who won at the last election. That's a demographic that's only going to grow. And the Labour Party is trying to essentially win back all those who are disaffected over things like Gaza and so forth. But also, in parts of the north of England, the Muslims are a critical mass. They don't need to have representation by the Labour Party anymore. So what the Labour Party is offering them, they're saying, look, there's no point wasting your vote on independent MPs. They can't change things. We are the government. We can protect you. We can bring in this Islamophobia law. You know, we could potentially, you know, just have local inquiries on the rape gangs and grooming gangs if you lend us your vote.